It's Wednesday, May 26th, and the time for your Barbados Today morning news update. Two of this country's teachers' unions are hoping that UNICEF's concerns about this year's Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate and Caribbean Advanced Proficiency examinations will achieve the reforms that they have been pushing for over a year. In a recent statement, UNICEF urged the CXC not to proceed with this year's exams in their current form and also called on the region's education ministers to urgently intervene to ensure students are not disadvantaged. President of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, Mary Redmond, said the mere fact that UNICEF had found it necessary to intervene was a very sad reflection of the current state of the regional examining body. She noted that while Education Minister Cynthia Bradshaw had been advocating for much needed adjustments, she had failed to attract the support of her counterparts across the region. Meanwhile, President of the Barbados Union of Teachers, Pedro Shepherd, pledged to keep a close eye on whether the government's response to the concerns expressed by UNICEF mirrors its response to domestic and regional stakeholders. Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy Kirk Humphrey has urged the small island developing states in the Caribbean, the Pacific, and elsewhere to ensure their more developed counterparts know the adverse effects of climate change on their sustainability. The minister made the call during a teleconference held on Tuesday ahead of the upcoming United Nations Biodiversity Conference slated for October 11 to 24 this year in China.
Barbados and the rest of the Caribbean have experienced firsthand the fallout from climate neglect in real ways. Every year, between June and November, one of our Caribbean islands is likely to be devastated by a Category 4 or 5 hurricane. Every year, sargassum seaweed, and if you do not know what sargassum seaweed is or looks like, I suggest you Google it so that you could get a sense of the devastation that we are actually facing. But it covers and overwhelms our beaches during some of the most beautiful months in the Caribbean. Every year, more of our popular West Coast beaches are disappearing, and our coral reefs are now a mere shadow of their former selves. We have it in ourselves to find these solutions to these problems, to adaptation and resilience buildings, to halt and to reverse the effects on the impacts of climate on the lives of our people. So our responses are not about being crafted as small island developing states, no. We see ourselves, as I said, as big ocean developing states. In countries like Barbados and the rest of the Caribbean, our brothers and sisters like Seychelles in the Indian Ocean, Samoa in the Pacific, and indeed all around the world, find ourselves facing a raging climate that we have done little to offend and do everything to appease.
Opposition leader Bishop Joseph Alali has questioned whether the state agency established to provide affordable housing solutions was set up to give the government an avenue to score political points, and he has called for clarity on the role of the National Housing Corporation, even as he queried about the Home Ownership Providing Energy Inc., which he said appeared to be doing what the NHC is mandated to do.
A voice from over there I heard complain in this very chamber about perceived marginalization of the NHC in its role. And I still think that that is an issue and it needs to be better clarified by the Honorable Minister, who always speaks with a very honest voice. That needs to be better clarified as to the role of the NHC. I have a view that this administration has embarked upon a policy which was applied to politics, is now being applied to government, of what I call parallelism. Parallelism. And that is, Mr. Speaker, in an effort to create a context for better control, in an effort to perhaps get around regulations a bit, in an effort perhaps not to subject yourself to as full as scrutiny as perhaps you would desire, you create parallel entities because you want to achieve political ends as well as governmental public service ends. So you have your National Housing Corporation, but you create an entity called HOPE. And HOPE does, in the immediate instance, what NHC perhaps would normally do if it were in a position so to do, and the question has to be answered as to whether or not it is.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from the region, the Bahamas' Health Minister, Renward Wells, defends his government's decision to impose a 2-week COVID-19 lockdown on Andros and Cat Island. More in this report from Our News, Bahamas.
We do not have all of the infrastructure in the islands, the ventilators, the negative pressure inside the government facilities to be able to hold on to those persons who would become critical.
With Andros and Cat Island now under a strict 14-day lockdown due to a rise in COVID-19 cases, the health minister insisted the unpopular decision was necessary, given the limited capacity to deal with serious cases on the family island.
We would have to fly them out and fly them into New Providence. So our position has always been, if we see the expanding and surging of COVID in an island, that the government will move expeditiously to break the chains of transmission.
The government has secured larger ISO chambers to assist with getting overweight residents into Nassau from the family islands. It's been an issue since the start of the pandemic.
And finally, on the international scene, top infectious disease officials in the U.S. have issued a call for further investigations to be conducted on the origin of COVID-19. More in this report from Reuters TV.
It's imperative that we look and we do an investigation.
Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci called for further investigation into the origins of the coronavirus on Tuesday after a recent Wall Street Journal report about illnesses at a Chinese virology lab raised new questions about where COVID-19 may have come from, but said he and other experts felt it was more likely naturally occurring.
Many of us feel that it is more likely that this is a natural occurrence, as has happened with SARS-CoV-1, where it goes from an animal reservoir to a human. But we don't know 100% the answer to that.
At the same White House COVID-19 briefing, senior advisor Andy Slavitt said finding the origin of the virus that has killed a reported 3.5 million people worldwide was a, quote, critical priority.
We need to get to the bottom of this, and we need a completely transparent process from China.
U.S. Health Secretary Javier Becerra called for international experts to be allowed to further evaluate the source of COVID-19 in a second phase investigation during a video address to the World Health Organization, but did not mention China directly.
Phase 2 of the COVID origin study must be launched with terms of reference that are transparent, science-based, and give international experts the independence to fully assess the source of the virus and the early days of the outbreak.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.